Hello everyone and welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video. And since we have just finished our 3v3 Grand Arena Championship month, I wanted to review some of my top defensive teams that I saw getting holds, and then also want to go over some of my opponent's best 3v3 teams that don't overlap with my ones. And just as a background, if you haven't watched my Grand Arena videos, I am in a high end of Division 2, around 4.3, almost 4.4 million GP. So of course, these kind of teams and gear levels, etc., can be different depending on what stage of the game you are at. So let's have a look at the first team here, Nude with GBA and Django. I repeatedly said this during my Grand Arenas. I am not very impressed by Geos, like GBA led and then two other Geos in 3v3, because I really think they are missing too many synergies, attacks out of turn, etc. I mean, every Geo notion has their specific purpose, and they are just built for a 5v5 team. And that's why I actually started using GBA as a tank with under Newt lead. In the beginning, started off instead of using Django, using Dooku, which actually once gave me also a hold in the very beginning. But this variant that I used later on, because I wanted to have Dooku as an extra leader, actually gave me a total of 4 defensive wins across several battles and matchups. So I really think this is a good team that can catch you off guard. The next team is one of the few meta teams in my list here, Padme. Of course, this depends again on what your opponent has left for offense. So my Padme actually did not get a lot of holds, but from time to time, even though I had her in the bottom front zone, so basically the first thing that usually my opponents attack, I actually have gotten a few holds. And actually looking back at the history, it was failed mirror matches, or even trying to use a Grievous team, or even Darth Revan sometimes failed against this Padme team. So definitely a good defensive option. Of course, also good in offense, but I never liked Padme in offense very much, because you more or less always will lose the protection banners, and unless you have Shak T in there in a 5v5 situation, maybe there's no way of regenerating protection, because protection up doesn't count. Next team, surprisingly, it's Karth Mission and Zalbar. This was one of my backwall teams, so I'm pretty sure this was more in terms of not having enough good characters and teams left, or maybe just thinking you could go in and cheese the team. But actually, Karth Mission and Zalbar is a solid team, so yeah, definitely an option. Then surprisingly, also my relatively low gear Talzin Daka and Spirit got a total of 3 holds during this month. And I would suspect, because this was top front zone usually where I placed it, this is again a matter of underestimating and thinking you could probably take them out with something that in the end didn't work. So yeah. Next up, we have some first order variants that, again, I always placed in the bottom back zone that have gotten me some holds. I think a total of actually 3, the two teams combined. So I'm not 100% convinced whether they are great defensively. It depends, again, of course, on what your opponent has left. I stopped using the lower team here with Watt, because I wanted to use my Kano Mask for offense actually to solo teams, which worked in most cases, and then I just had to switch over. Plus, I actually moved Watt to another team And this is a team that I really liked and that I actually got inspired from an opponent that I faced, I think, in the first week, Asajj, Zombie, and Watt. Because, of course, Watt will put the taunting tag on Zombie, so Zombie will regenerate protection, and you actually have to kill it. And then, of course, you have to kill Asajj, who will start ramping up, and Watt will give her the med pack. So she will also regenerate health and protection every turn a character takes. So it's going to be even harder to kill her. So I believe, especially if you have a Relic Asajj, this can be a tricky team if you don't have the right one. Plus, actually, Watt can also revive Asajj. So even if you've managed to kill Asajj finally after including the zombie revives, if you have an unlucky timing and Watt is still alive and Zombie is still alive, and then Watt can actually revive Asajj. So yeah. Last team from my top defensive teams here is Rex Clones. I always put it also in the back bottom zone, and surprisingly, it only held once and was usually one shot. This is probably due to the fact that you don't really underestimate that team. You know Rex Lead is dangerous with the Rexilate, so you probably just go in with a very important, good team. But of course, if it's in the back zone and your opponent doesn't have a very, very good team left over, it can also catch you off guard. So I still think it's a good defensive option. So let's go over a few teams that I was surprised by my opponents or I underestimated. And this is more or less in chronological order. So I believe in the beginning, some of these teams were by opponents that set either too heavy defense or I was maybe not experienced enough in 3v3 yet with all these teams to know what exactly I should maybe use. First thing is a gas team, exactly in that composition that I faced with Arc Trooper and Ahsoka. And I actually tried to mirror it, I think more or less exactly with the same. And it came down to gas versus gas. And back then, before going into the battle, I was surprised because my opponent's gas was not modded for a lot of protection, as a lot of gas are modded nowadays, but for a lot of health. And I went actually into that battle because my gas had a lot of protection, thinking, oh yeah, that's going to be easy. Because of course the opponent's gas will take a seat very, very fast. But it turns out that in the end, when it came down to a 1v1 gas versus gas, of course, my opponent's gas had a much bigger health pool, much bigger survivability, and thus took out my gas. And actually, if you have watched my last video from the last final match of 3v3, I actually did the same, and now I had my gas modded for health, and I easily beat my opponent's gas in the final 1v1. So I think this is something to keep in mind for the future of 3v3, depending on, of course, how meta, etc. changes once we get it again, that maybe gas should be modded more for health than for protection in a 3v3 scenario. Next up is JKR. In the first 2 rounds, I believe, I saw JKR on defense, and especially also once with Relic Jolie Bindo. And I timed out in a mirror match, which is of course always annoying. We remember that from the JKR meta. And I think I tried using CLS because I figured, okay, if I get to trigger the Savior quickly, but well, it didn't work out in the end. Similar for CLS, usually you don't see that on defense, but I saw it 1 or 2 times, and yes, it was tricky to beat without having my own CLS at my disposal anymore. Another team that actually caught me off guard once in the beginning was this Bastila team here. Of course, especially Ezra was much, much higher geared than my own Ezra. But I believe also Bastila was at gear 13 and Ezra was gear 11 or gear 12. So Ezra was so Bastila was super, super thick, and Ezra had the damage. And whatever I had left on teams, I just couldn't get through anymore. And the problem is, of course, the Jedi, as long as Bastila is still alive, every time you go in with a new team, Bastila will have the protection up still again from the start of the battle. Another team that can catch you off guard is Shakti with clones. In this case, it was Echo and Fives. I thought my Darth Revan, I believe it was with HK and Sith Empire Trooper, can easily take out Shakti and clones. And, well, nope. I remember exactly, Fives one-shot my Darth Revan having full health. So yeah, this team definitely also don't underestimate it. Now again, we have some Newt variations. I quite like the idea of Newt, Django, and Watt. I mean, Watt is a great plug-and-play character anyways, right? But in this case, Watt, again, can revive. And when I went into battle, I forgot about that aspect. I had killed Django the second time, so he was completely gone, and then Watt revived him. It's like, oh no, I forgot that he can revive. So this can maybe also catch you off guard. And when I was fighting my opponent with this Newt, Dooku, and Malak combination, the Malak was actually only gear 11, so I didn't have a lot of issues. But if you have a fast Dooku and a high gear Malak, it can be very, very difficult, because then Dooku will put himself and Newt under stealth in his first opening move, and then you will have to hit Malak. And, well, there's not a lot of teams that can easily take on Malak. Plus, you have the stuns of Dooku. You have all the shenanigans from Newt, especially if he has his Zeta. Then Dooku stuns and debuffs will also dish out more damage. Of course, Malak also has his debuffs and fears and force drains, etc. Life drain, rather, I think. So yeah, this team can definitely be also nasty. Next up, a first order team. Again, this is from my last round now. My opponent said Crew, Sith Trooper, and OG Kylo. The gear levels on the Kylos were actually lower, but Sith Trooper was at gear 12. And I completely underestimated that team. I thought, okay, my JTR can handle it, but turns out no. The Sith Trooper, even at gear 12, was really dealing a lot of damage. So don't sleep on Sith Trooper teams. Last team here is Mission Zalba variant, but now Vader lead. This team really only works with Darth Vader lead Zeta, which I don't have. I only have the unique. But let's actually go in here and show it. What the leader ability does is actually that it adds on damage over times whenever they expire, so you keep them stacking and stacking. And this basically effectively shuts down the OG Kylo Ren solo counter, which is a very good counter versus Karth Mission in Zalbar. And out of lack of alternatives, I actually still had to try my OG Kylo, as you can see, Relic 5, with the Zeta against this team, and I think my opponent had a similar gear level as I do on Vader Mission in Zalbar. And as I was afraid, the dots kept stacking and stacking on my Kylo, and at some point Vader's Culling Blade throw just one-shot my Kylo from full health and protection. So definitely don't sleep on this team. Don't use OG Kylo solo. Malak solo can still work. I've done that before. But don't underestimate Vader lead if it's Zeta. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Feel free to comment down below what kind of teams were you were throwing you off, or were you facing, or what kind of teams were holding very well for you. And maybe also give some context of gear levels and maybe what GP you're at, so it's easier to judge whether this is something important for someone else who might read it. All right, having said that, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye.